thank our presenting sponsors. You see those logos here on the screen. You might have noticed a couple of new logos, so please do pay attention. Yes, we are so thrilled to continue many of these partnerships and to introduce some new partnerships. So please do take a look and say thanks to our sponsors that show up every day since the middle of March to support this conversation. Good morning and good day to Julia Patrick. Julia is the CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I am her very fortunate co-host. So far, I've kept my job, even with those co-host guests that have come on. So I'm Jarrett Ransom, the nonprofit nerd, CEO of the Raven Group. In today's robust conversation about board assessment, we are so thrilled to have you join us, Tracy. Tracy Vanderneck joins us. So welcome, and I can't wait to learn more from you.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
So Tracy, you're coming to us from Florida. What city?
I'm in Bradenton. It's south of Tampa on the West Coast.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. Okay, cool. Well, so we're covering the nation today from coast to coast, it seems. And the big topic of the day is board assessment. Every nonprofit leader that I talk with morning, noon, and night, they complain about their board. Very few leaders that I come in contact with have something that they're just like, I love my board. I never want it to change, which is shocking in itself. But one of the tools that we can use is the board assessment. And not enough of our boards are doing this. So I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Really important. So first of all, hello, what is a board assessment?
Julia, you were absolutely right that not enough boards are doing this, not enough nonprofits. It's an industry standard that a nonprofit board should do an assessment annually. And what it does is it's a yearly evaluation that helps them identify where they are. It gives them a benchmark, what they're doing well, and it identifies areas that need some work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that they do this, is so that they can, they need to be on top of their game so that they can support the mission of the organization.
Mm-hmm. You know, when we talk about that, and I mean, this is like a curveball, but how many boards do you think are even doing this? Like percent to total? I can't even.
A wild guess, I would say less than 50%.
That's what I was going to say. Jarrett, what do you think?
I would agree. I mean, we just heard from one of the experts, but so many of the organizations I've worked with, and I asked them to show me a board assessment, they haven't done one.
Not at all. Mm-hmm. And what comes out of it is so useful that they really should be doing it. Yeah. And once they start, they generally don't stop, which is
right.
Good.
Right. And I'm like a little taken aback at your once a year piece of this, because I would say most boards that I've worked with or been asked to speak to or speak with, they do it maybe every 3 years.
Right.
They don't do it. I mean, Jarrett, what do you think? What do you see?
Well, you know, for those that really have done a good one, and I would consider successful, do visit this at least every year. But it's also kind of been a taboo conversation that some organizations don't want to spotlight board members that aren't pulling their weight or doing what they've been asked to do. So it's really kind of been a point of contention, I think, in several conversations. So I'm really excited to learn maybe how nonprofits can either introduce it or re-engineer it to be truly successful.
Yes. So let me ask the first question then. And that's kind of like, I love that you use the word taboo, Jarrett, because I kind of see that's true. But let's start with, can a board assess themselves?
Taboo is right, because a lot of boards don't necessarily want to share their true feelings about the operations of the organization. So they technically can assess themselves, but they shouldn't. And the biggest reason for that is that with no malintent whatsoever, when someone from within the organization or someone on the board creates the questions for the yearly assessment, they tend to end up leading questions, or they tend to ask questions that end up with the outcome that they're looking for. And like I said, it's not necessarily on purpose, it just ends up happening. But when you bring in somebody from the outside who has absolutely no stake in what the answers are, it can be more even. Now, one of the things that I do is I make sure that I administer the assessment fully blind, and I let them know that ahead of time. So I can't even see, I do it electronically. I can't even see what email address the answers are coming from. And when I tell the board members that ahead of time, it helps them feel secure in giving us more truthful answers than they might if they felt like they could be identified by their email address.
Wow, that's great. And I'm sitting here thinking, in all my years of board service, I don't think I've ever had that. I think I've always known that my answers were going to be identifiable to me.
And that probably tainted how you answered or affected how you answered.
Yeah, it probably did. It probably did. I don't know, Jarrett, what do you think about that?
You know, I would agree. I have done, when I do my strategic planning for board retreats, I do ask a preliminary survey of the board members. However, I use a very simple Google form. So, you know, it does tell me who they are, but I do share with them that I won't share this with anyone outside of myself, but knowing that their name is tied to that, right? I can absolutely see that that might actually prevent some truthfulness to show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Tracy,
I also,
when you do this, what's the percentage of people that actually respond? Do you get 100% participation, or do you fight that a little, or what does that ever look like?
We do fight for it. And one of the ways that I can get away with fighting for it is that they know that I can't see who's responded. So I have to contact the whole board and say, all right, we're at 80%. And that puts a little bit of peer pressure on that the board members want to stop getting emails about it if they've completed it. So it pushes everyone to complete it. And generally, if there's somebody that can't, they'll email me on the side and say, I'm not going to be able to do that. Wow. So it's very rare that we have maybe one or two that don't participate, but in general, everyone does. Wow. And I also administer an almost exact replica of the assessment to the staff, to the executive staff and the fundraising staff that would work with the board. And I tell the board that they know that I'm doing it, but I tell them that I won't give them the answers. And it always brings up something very interesting to see how the staff perceives the exact same situation that I'm asking the board about. And it helps us uncover areas that may be potential problems that each other, the staff and the board may not realize are a problem.
Very interesting.
Very
interesting. Love that strategy. What about, like, who sets the measurements? Who identifies success when it comes to the assessment? I'm assuming there's some kind of qualitative metrics that is used either by the organization when they recruit a board member, or can you talk to us about that measurement?
Yes, I can talk to you about what we measure. And it's not the same type of metrics that we look at in terms of fundraising. It's more how organizations believe they are producing in certain areas. So the assessment that I administer has two sections. The first, they answer questions about how they believe the board is doing as a whole. And in the second half, they answer questions about how they believe they're personally doing as a board member. So inevitably, everybody thinks that they're doing wonderfully, but that the board as a whole could use some work. So it's very interesting to see that happen time and again. But in terms of what we evaluate, it's everything from functional items like is the board meeting enough? Are they getting their documentation on time? Are people reading the financials? Do they know how to read the financials?
Yeah.
To very specific things, such as what policies and procedures does the organization have? And does the board know what those should be and whether they have them? A gift acceptance policy would be a good example of that. So many boards don't know what a gift acceptance policy is and that there should be one. So the point of the things that we evaluate, it's not to poke holes in the board. It really does show areas that they're doing well, but it highlights for them areas where there's clear need for improvement. And some of those areas almost always are talking points, how people communicate about the organization. And I saw one of your previous guests recently talked about storytelling and how everybody should be telling the story in the same way. But if the organization doesn't educate and train the board about that, then they tend to just focus on the part that they're interested in.
Right.
So, from that to media inquiries, if something happens and the media calls, who's the person that's supposed to answer that? And have they been trained on how they'll answer that? So you can see it's a really broad range of items that we look at in an assessment. And of course, strategic planning and the board's role in fundraising is obviously a very huge section of what we evaluate in a board assessment.
So let me ask you this then. Are you, it's like two-part question. How you're administrating this online through a portal that each board member engages with?
I use Google Forms just like Jarrett does.
Okay. So then how long is the normal assessment? Like how long would a board member engage on that? And what would be the time frame that this is open?
I usually leave it open. I try not to let it be too long. It's about a week and a half. Anything longer than that, it gets lost in the pile of emails and it doesn't happen. So just like in fundraising, you need the little kick that makes it more important and makes it time sensitive. And that's how we go about getting the answers from them. And then what I do is take a step back, go through the raw data, and create a report for the organization that not only gives them the raw data, but shows them which areas there are potential red flags and yellow flags and helps them prioritize which of the things that came out of the assessment they should be celebrating and which of the things they should either address right away or at least prioritize over other things that year.
And so what about like who then sees the assessment, right? So my assumption and from my experience is the board collectively sees the assessment, I should say the results of the assessment, as well as the leadership. But what about anyone outside? Are there any external eyes on this outside of maybe a facilitated consultant?
Not on the ones that I do and not on anything that I'm familiar with. It's very much an internal process and it is private to the organization. Okay. I do give them the raw data and that can be very uncomfortable because when people realize that it is completely blind and nobody knows who's answering what, some of the things that come out are very straightforward and sometimes even brutal. So I warn them ahead of time. I ask them, do you want the raw data or do you just want the report that the executive summary that sort of combines everything? But then what I do, I always encourage them to set up a session afterwards, 90 minutes maybe, where I come and talk to the board. They've gotten it, they've read the report, but then we talk about it. Because if this isn't what you do as a job, reading that report, you may not realize what the implications of some of the things are that come up in that report. So then we talk about it. How important is it that we just found out that our nonprofit isn't still registered to solicit funds in the state of Florida because somebody forgot to turn in the paperwork? Things like that they don't realize might be happening, and that they don't have to be an expert in everything, but they do have to know what questions to ask and who to ask those questions of.
Right. In the past several years, I've always done a lot of talking to boards, during board retreats and stuff like that, mostly motivational kind of things. And I've been asked by a number of groups to come in and kind of present the board source assessments that, you go out, you take it, and then it's measured against the country. And it's been absolutely fascinating to see what this comes in. But to your point, I think what I've been asked to do this more and more, and it's nothing that I do professionally. It's just been an add-on. Could you help us with this? Because the data is so overwhelming and it's so intense that they can't figure out what they should be focusing on, because then they get all like, well, wait, this is what everybody else is doing. It's a really interesting conflict. And yet I really think it's one of those things that each organization has got to be putting this into the regular trajectory of how they manage themselves.
Absolutely, especially because at least some of the board changes every year. So the people that remain on the board feel like they have it all down. They know the information, but what they forget is there's other people coming on, there's other personalities coming on, and you want to be evaluating not only the specifics of what committees do you have and do people even know what committee they're on, but you want to be evaluating how is the communication flow between board members and how is the communication flow between the board and staff? And do the board members realize where those boundaries are? So to your point, looking at what other organizations do and where they are with it is important, but being able to identify what could potentially cause glitches in your own organization and prioritize those and make a plan for fixing them, that is a really important step and part of the assessment process.
And, I advocate that for new board members coming in, I think it's a really good idea to share that assessment.
That would be
because
good.
Otherwise, you have to wait generally at least a year if your board is doing an assessment every year, which I would argue most boards aren't. You've got to wait all that time to then see kind of what's going on. And I think that from the boards I've worked with and that I've served on, you take it to heart, if it's not just a one and done thing, if it's being reviewed and if it's being revisited. And so I think for an onboarding piece would be really a great tool to use that. And maybe that's like a board chair to new board members coming in kind of conversation,
Absolutely. If you're sharing a booklet or a list of things ahead of time, trying to appropriately set expectations and determine if it would be the right relationship if that person came on the board, you're going to be giving them your, copies of 990s, your strategic plan, things that they can evaluate to determine if it's right. So of course you want to, if you're transparent, you want them to know the personality of the board. And in that same vein, through the assessment process, one of the questions is, are you doing a skills matrix? Are you doing an area of expertise matrix like the one from BoardSource? And are you using the information from that in your recruiting that happens throughout the year?
Right. Great piece. We have a question that I want to make sure we ask you live during the show.
Sure.
And one of our viewers writes in and wants to know, do you ever include an assessment of each board member by the CEO and the board chair?
I don't. Not in the overall board self-assessment, but that should be done yearly. evaluations of each board member, just like you do evaluations of staff members, and give them feedback on, what they're doing well, what you appreciate, and what areas they need to work on. That should be happening with individual board members as well. We don't do it though at the larger level where we're calling out specific board members in front of the group. It's very much personal between usually the board chair and that individual board member. So it's a peer type of relationship.
Right.
Well, and I think that's where I've seen the point of contention. I've heard some organizations implement something much like, a scorecard, a report card, and they would have all the board members listed, and they would say, have they attended their certain percentage, yay or nay? Have they given, yay or nay, right? And so then you can see, and maybe not see the exact amount of their gift, but also help to track their soft dollars. And that's very much, more of the fundraising focus. Or have they attended events, right? Like really kind of share that. And I've heard that being shared publicly within that intimate board setting. So I don't mean general public, right? This is around.
Right. Okay, I understand now.
So I've heard that. And I think that's really what's been the point of contention is, maybe board members that aren't stepping up, they feel like they're on blast and therefore they're really uncomfortable.
So I'm going to wave the flag of the board liaison, because I've worked with a lot of groups where this function goes over to the board liaison function, and it's a one sheet, and everything, it's like to your point, it's the give or get, it's the volunteer serve, it's all these different things, and then the board liaison is responsible for tracking that. And then it goes off, it's ticked off. And again, it can be very specific, or it can just be a yay or nay. And then that person reports back out to the board. So it makes it less contentious and extremely factual, because everybody's got the same performance sheet, if you will.
Yeah. That sounds like a good middle ground there.
Right.
Yes. Much less contentious.
It's a dicey thing. So thank you for that question. That was a great question. I want to get to, because our time is almost up. Tracy, so board assessments during a wacky time.
Yes.
What does that look like?
The core things that we evaluate during an assessment are going to stay the same, because the responsibilities of a board member to ensure that the organization is financially secure, is doing everything in a transparent and legal way. All of those things are core things that need to be happening all the time for the organization to exist. We also would always be tracking whether they, are meeting their obligations, as Jarrett was just talking about, but in a more blind way, where everybody's not seeing everybody else's information. But we should add, during times like this, we need to add some questions that evaluate how we are addressing and dealing with things that are coming up, whether it is the coronavirus pandemic and risk management and HR issues that come up because of the pandemic, and the social justice issues that are everywhere in the country right now. Some nonprofits, that's going to be very central to what happens at their organization. So the questions do need to be tweaked depending on what's really happening in the nonprofit environment and at the country as a whole. And it could be things as simple as has the organization evaluated its communications policy and what people should or should not say in an election year? That, it seems like an obvious small piece, but if we're not addressing it, then there's potential for problems there. Now, it's interesting that you bring that up, because even though we always assess the main items, I do talk to board chairs and executive directors ahead of time, just to ask them, is there anything going on at your organization? Is there any problem that you feel is a problem that you want to, in this safe way, ask about so that it can be brought to the surface and the group can then start to address it? So sometimes there are different pieces added in that are specific to the organization.
Yeah, that's smart. So then you've gone through all this work and you've done all these very prescribed, deliberate actions. What do you do? Does it just like so many other things sit on a shelf? Or how do you make it so that it has impact?
Just like your strategic plan, if you spend all that time doing your strategic plan and then it becomes a doorstop, there's no point in having done it. It should be something that is visited on a regular basis,
Okay.
especially because in the report that comes out of a board assessment, you're basically getting a list of things that can be easily checked off. Do we need to do this? Yes. Do we need to do this? So you can actually have some really good success quickly, and you want to report that success back to the board so that the whole process feels like it was a good process. But in the same way that you revisit a strategic plan regularly, you want to ensure that if something came up about potential issues, if the board say, was focusing too much on day-to-day management and not enough on strategic governance, that is a very core issue that needs to be addressed. So I would say, just like with your strategic plan, at least monthly or every other month, it should be looked back at to see how you're doing in all of those areas.
And
that's just going to help the organization.
Yeah.
I like that you add about the successes, because we all want positive reinforcement and we all want something to celebrate. And especially during a time, we've really been in this whirlwind of life now for so many months, and no one had the crystal ball for this. It's really a great way, I think, to continue to build community during such uncertain times. And this information has been very insightful. And I know that we're going to have some questions come up. So Julia, maybe if you can put up her screen and we can show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got more information, Tracy. So your web address here is phil-com.com. And I love that, where philanthropy and communications meet. That's so important and so critical for the success and sustainability. It's more than a buzzword, right?
Very true.
For our sector. So again, do you have, like, on your website, do you have blog articles or any other resources in which people, because I'm imagining, as I'm seeing some very common names on our view list right now, if an organization has never done an assessment, do you have some materials on your website about the benefits of that so that maybe they could share that with their team?
I do have some good information on the website, a little bit of information about board assessments, and I have a blog on Nonprofit Pro.
Perfect.
So that's where you're going to get more detailed information that could be good tools to share with your board.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you have been great. Tracy Vanderneck, coming to us from Florida today, talking about the value and the best practice of board assessments. We have been so thrilled to have you with us. I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined by the nonprofit nerd herself, CEO Jarrett Ransom. I should say Jarrett Ransom, CEO of the Raven Group. Get that right. I've only said it like almost 200 times.
That's okay. I know.
Good Lord. Hey, we have our Friday Ask and Answered coming up. If this show strikes something at 2 a.m, don't hesitate. You got 4 ways to get to us and get your questions for our Friday wrap-up Ask and Answer. Want to also let you know about the Nonprofit Atlas. It's a directory of nonprofit resources, nonprofitatlas.com. Go ahead and take a look. It's super cool. And very soon, I'm not supposed to announce this, it's going to have its own Roku and Amazon Fire TV channel.
Nice.
Exciting.
Very exciting. Executive producer Kevin Pace will not be so happy that I jumped the gun on that. We want to thank our presenting sponsors. Without you, we would not have this dynamic conversation as we do every day. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, this has been the Nonprofit Show. I'm Julia Patrick here with Jarrett Ransom and Tracy Vanderneck. And we want to leave you today with the message we leave you with every day. And that is stay well so you can do well. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks a lot. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It was fun.